Political Prisoner, 192,703, The Truth Matters. About the author, human rights activist Marcia BNoose. Author, born as Marcia Anita Hobbs in Rose Park, Adelaide, South Australia, 25th April 1984. Joining in 2015, Le Droit Humain Co-Freemasonry, Lodge 406. When the most honest thing you can ever say is the oddest thing you will ever say, I wouldn't change a day or have it any other way. Marcia Anita Hobbs aka Marcia BNoose, anything but ordinary. Judgment and perception have no value here. Autobiographical series. The content of this is real, candid, clumsy, courageous, and curious. Enjoy. Dedication to everyone I love and to justice for all. For everyone who believes in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, shall good always prevail over evil. Marcia Anita Hobbs, Political Prisoner. Doc. No. 192,703, Human Rights Matter. Copyright Marcia Anita Hobbs BNoose. 2024, this work depicts actual events in the life of the author as truthfully as recollection permits. This is a work of nonfiction. No names have been changed, no characters invented, no events fabricated. The right of Marcia Anita Hobbs BNoose to be identified as the author of this work has been asserted by the author in accordance with the Copyright Act 1968, Sect 35, Ownership of Copyright in Original Works, AUS. All rights reserved. No part of this publication may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means, electronic, mechanical, photocopying, recording, or otherwise, without the prior permission of the author and/or publishers. Any person who commits any unauthorized act in relation to this publication may be liable to criminal prosecution and civil claims for damages. Political Prisoner number 192,703. A CIP catalog record for this title is available from the National Library of Australia. www.Barbwire Noose. Barbwire Noose Registered Thai Limited Australia. Acknowledgements Honest Girls, Chicks B for Dicks, AWP Ladies. To the truth upholders and whistleblowers of the world, together we make a better world. Chapters Introduction 2024 equals approximately 5 months of travel and 5 months of prison. This book detailing what it was to do more time than some pedos, the setbacks endured, the becoming of a cover-up. June 3, July 15, 2024, 42 days at the Adelaide Women's Prison, Tort 1, Incarceration by SAPOL. From Approx. Midnight 1 June 2024 until 3 June 2024 at Elizabeth Cells. 10 Fast PACED Days 10 Days of Freedom. Port Power V's Richmond. Channel 9 Channel 10 Barbwire Noose Registered. Human Rights, TVC, Shopping, Botox Majestic Minima. The Return to AWP Incarceration Tort 2 by SAPOL 2024. Throwing the justice system into disrepute with perjury, abuse of power and process with intent to pervert the course of justice. July 26, 2025. August TVC debut Channel 9. Finally, Barbwire Noose Registered debuted its first television commercial on Channel 9. A year in the making, the broadcast was a success. Well received, great feedback, and the branding I strive for. Real, passionate, connected, meaningful, and fun. Ruby Unit 15 weeks in the privileged part of prison, until a bully moved me to high security and placed me on a restricted regime for a frivolous reason. Like SAPOL's pursuit of myself, the move was harassment and baseless at best. Opal Unit until trial, the punishment unit, as it is referred to. The old part of the jail where you sleep in the same room as you toilet. No doors, no walls, no curtains in between you and the bed. Port Adelaide COURTS VNTIA SCRAWS, you push the wrong persons out the door without grounds. You assaulted me, a free person, when I did not have my identification, bank card, phone, property, or even my personal shoes. Jewelry, clothes, shoes. I rang the Department of Corrections to be safe upon release. Staff at the Adelaide Women's Prison tried to flounder in the duty of care regarding a vulnerable girl, hours away from her home residence. The end forever a political prisoner. Not dead, still alive. Introduction, 2024 equals approximately 5 months of travel and 5 months of prison. This book details what it was to do more time than some pedos, the setbacks endured, and the becoming of a cover-up. From his unpublished autobiographical manuscript written in prison. 2. But an autobiography of a freedom fighter must inevitably be influenced by the question whether the revelation of certain facts, however true they may be, will help advance the struggle or not. If the disclosure of such facts will enable us to see problems clearly and bring nearer our goal, then it is our duty to do so, however much such revelations may adversely affect the particular individuals concerned. Nelson Mandela, Conversations with Myself. Most of this autobiography was drafted as a handwritten manuscript during my time at Adelaide Women's Prison, AWP. Thank you to everyone who gave me pens. I love you all. Outwardly, I smiled happy, funny, and mischievous. But all it took was a word, a moment, a statement to reveal the deep look of a tormented soul. Almost half of 2024, I spent traveling the east coast of Australia, free as a bird. The other half of 2024 was mostly spent in the confinement of AWP, with as little freedom as life can offer. The torts are a result of 2 separate incarcerations during the period, starting from June 2024 until the start of December 2024. Locked up for what should have been a no-case-to-answer defense, 10 days separated this devastating level of harassment that SAPOL repeated. Almost 6 weeks of this time, I was locked in the old parts of AWP, like a dungeon, compared to other units. A small concrete and wire cage was all you had to exercise in over the 5 or so hours of out-of cell time that was allocated as unlock for the day. Enough room for a row of 6 to 8 people wide to stand side by side and step approximately 10 steps to the other end of the cage. I was given fewer privileges than convicted pedophiles while held on remand at AWP, pleading, not guilty. Both the best of my strengths and the worst of my death-wishing misery shone. Through hope and hardship, torts and collective trauma, the altruist elements of the moment kept me going. A determination not to allow a cover-up of criminal negligence to succeed. A vision of a better world, Barbwire Noose registered BN couture gracing the New York Fashion Week runways, Milan, London, Paris, all. Vision and a blur during solidarity. I dreamed of and at times dreaded freedom. I felt like I felt nothing and had a lack of freedom for a decade since 2014. Prison, at times, seemed easier than reality. Despite my life's momentous achievements, a mindless, numbing, fancy-free environment. Regimented, roof, 3 meals, warm bed, the worst features were unruly screws. Prison guards who would pin inmates against each other and create drama, causing fights that resulted in injuries to inmates and guards alike. Jail shouldn't be easy, yet it should not be an avenue for exploiting taxpayers' dollars by betting on fights between inmates, antagonizing people past rehabilitation to trauma level, and engaging in criminal conduct causing drug overdoses and injuries. Personally, I witnessed staff encouraging inmates to fight each other both verbally, as a group directive, and individually. Good case notes were promised to persons who would do the bidding of staff, whether the deed was sexual gratification or physical violence. As well as being subject to harassment from heterosexual and homosexual staff, female screws in a female prison with a sexual desire for women, to me, was more confronting than being strip-searched by a male who desired women. The integrity and legal evaluations of prison procedure and failing logistics are evident in each area of prison. Emotionally exhausted is the only way to explain feeling such peace in chaos, drained and revived so many times over these years. Jail sucks and was a really bad holiday, yet I grew there. Unfortunately for the men driving my incarceration, I did not languish. Refusing to go out like this, brand Barbwire Noose registered nearing its 20th birthday. I found hope and happiness in being productive during this time. As hard as it was, I entered the Carey Packer Civic Center and UNISA Artists on the Inside exhibit, created a silk painting, and both human rights artworks. The silk for an exhibition with KU Arts, which was also a public exhibition. I was promised by the staff that I would be able to keep these exhibited artworks. When the exhibition at the art gallery closed, my artworks were not returned to me. Instead, they apparently went missing in transit, according to AWP, after months of following up on the exhibited property. Continuing to manage my clothing brand from the inside. Barbwire Noose registered TVC debuts on mainstream television. The design concepts I had been pondering since late 2023, I drew up Eco Fashion Week Australia 2024 garments, sketching my fashion designs with a bit of color, thanks to the medical staff and inmates for providing and lending me pencils. I also had time to draw up Barbwire Noose registered Clothing 2025 streetwear concepts, too, which launched upon release from prison in December 2024. Some of these designs I also have tattooed on my body, because being reminded of prison and all I achieved during adversity, I apparently think is nice. Judge not, lest ye be judged. Matthew 7:1 Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Writing and engaging in litigation regarding the defamation that saw me in this position, I achieved redress for institutional sexual violence suffered at the hands of SAPOL, and engaged a personal injury claims lawyer against SAPOL regarding Police versus Kurt Gavin Slavin, DOB 7 NOV 1958, statement. Communicating the basis of defamation lawsuits and liaising with publishing opportunities for anything but ordinary abo. Judgment and perception have no value here. Autobiographical series keeping me quite busy. If I wasn't reading or exercising, I was writing or tanning, eating or sleeping. Oppressed, dehumanized, and degraded. A true account of how it is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in man. PSLAM 118. 8. The Bible, hope, and faith, for the most part, gave me something to look forward to. I have always been able to live in confined spaces, occupying my time with reading and writing, drawing and music since I was a child. Spending much time in my room under parental care, in my late teens, and upon buying a single-bedroom home. Moving out of home at 16 years of age, I am capable of being up or down financially and keeping independent, looking after myself from my own resources. In small spaces, incarcerated, I suffered not from loneliness. I had people to talk to, suffering not in wanting, as I had money to make purchases each week. Not perturbed by the overall experience, just many lost opportunities over 5 months. Fate always brings jealousy, envy of the inspiration I aroused with my persistence, pushing against power, corrupt power. The bullshit of the environment was uncomfortable. My cousin gave some good advice. A seasoned jailbird, she said. Keep out of the politics, which was a solid tip for me as nothing more than a prison system newbie. Bullying isn't my style to dish or to take. So you can imagine how in jail was for me. It wasn't crazy, but it wasn't me either. If I am around a bully, I leave or I say something to that twat. There is no real middle ground, space to tolerate bullshit hate. Go fuck yourself, I say to a bully. Don't like it, don't dish your ugly behavior then. Autobiographical series, Anything But Ordinary Judgment and Perception Have No Value Here, Book 6. Before delving into the nitty-gritty, I am sharing my perspective on bullying, as prison is filled with large personalities, friends, foes, and power-tripping petty bullies. The following was written in 2018, when I was involved in international beauty pageants. I have stood up for disabled rights in 2004, empowerment against oppression since 2005, 2017, against bullying gang behavior in 2012, for a deceased victim's justice in 2014, and community safety 2015, ongoing. It is important to remember in our discussions about bullying that words are not the real issue. The tone, the delivery, the gossip, the constant badgering of another's soul is the behavior we should condemn. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. An old saying of strength, not weakness. Teaching you and your children to know thyself, believe in the person you are, and never be defined by another. The greatest power you have against a bully is your reaction. Self-defense is kindness to yourself and others, a deterrent to ego and fear-driven activity. Use your voice. Knowing when to stand up or walk away is one of the most empowering decisions we can make. To stop bullying, we cannot just simply say no. We need to encourage cultural change and independent thinking to ensure the bad influence of one is not passed on and encouraged as behavior in another. Empower the courage to be kind to one another and stand up, speak out. Stop Bullying Campaign 2018. Prison felt like a plot to push the refuge of suicide. Bullying. Government, boys' club bullying. I refuse to be bullied like that. Any right-thinking person agreed that the victim was me. Power, government police, even religion, Freemasonry, were abusing a legal opportunity to seize the day, change their ways, and move forward from eras of criminal negligence. Conflate and confuse operations at the taxpayer's expense, misappropriation of the taxpayer's funds, to cover up unlawful enforcement. Not investigating legitimate allegations, just making accusations. Damaging, defamatory accusations. In my mind, the discreditation of myself can be compared to elements of the downfall of J. Robert Oppenheimer, DOB 22 APR 1904, 18 FEB 1967, orchestrated by Louis Strauss, DOB 31 JAN 1896, 21 JAN 1974, a Wall Street financier, American government personality and atomic energy advisor, U.S. Naval Reserve officer. Louis Strauss, DOB 31 JAN 1896, 21 JAN 1974, was the driving force behind physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer's DOB 22 APRA 1904, 18 FEB 1967, security clearance hearing, held in April and May 1954, before J. Robert Oppenheimer's DOB 22 APR 1904, 18 FEB 1967, security clearance was revoked. As a result, Louis Strauss, DOB 31 JAN 1896, 21 JAN 1974, often has been regarded as a villain in American history. My thinking compares Louis Strauss, DOB 31 JAN 1896, 21 JAN 1974, to police and political top dogs plotting against me. By 2024, it had been nearly 2 decades of building the brand Barbwire Noose registered and public scrutiny. Whether the government and corrupt sides of the police forces liked it or not, I had established myself as a public figure, fashion designer, and human rights activist. The truth out there in black and white, yet still being hidden by deceptive, perception-based operational tactics, efforts to confuse the truth in a cover-up as mental health, frivolous, untrue, unreliable, anything but defamation as the truth is defense regarding defamation claims. I reported the truth of criminal negligence cases surrounding SAPOL, exposing my own experiences with malfeasance and the fallout results of corruption. My extensive knowledge of reckless endangerment during operations which included deaths due to SAPOLs, police forces, failure to act lawfully cannot be ignored. While incarcerated in AWP, I read autobiographies. The literature reading, a personal interest, and hopping to broaden my writing style as I further established as a global author. I do quite like sharing views, philosophy, knowledge, progressions of time. The anything but ordinary autobiographical series, Judgment and Perception Have No Value Here, is my book series full of candid facts, experiences, quotes, and open to interpretation depending on where the reader's head is at in judgment of education, my life and thoughts. The books definitely share my views, knowledge, time spent in action, life, and theory fact literature. My life and life choice being open to media interpretation for years, poor investigative journalism. By 2019, let alone by 2024, I was determined for a truthful narrative to circulate. Nelson Mandela's biography sums up personal literature best, I think. Book, Conversations with Myself, he states. The trouble, of course, is that most successful men are prone to some form of vanity. There comes a stage in their lives when they consider it permissible to be egotistic and to brag to the public at large about their unique achievements. What a sweet euphemism for self-praise the English language has evolved. Autobiography, they choose to call it, where the shortcomings of others are frequently exploited to highlight the praiseworthy accomplishments of the author. So true. Reading this, I could relate. While I have made sure my life's evolution in imperfection and perfection has been equally shared, I could not help but feel at times the personalness of my autobiographies have truthfully and graphically shared shortcomings of others. Not just my own, being mindful not to brag yet. Proud of my achievements, this interpretation of an autobiography by Nelson Mandela is bang on the realities of biographical record. The highs and lows of life, often shared moments. When the hunter talks of killing the lion, it is the hunter's life that is glorified. though the lion has great achievements of its own unshared, as the hunter only knows his own life and the lion's role in it. A beautiful facade of a dangerous underbelly covers the complex life environment that is my 30s, and as written, authored. Prison an unstable element in an extraordinary true-life story. Rob Lowe book. Stories I only tell my friends sums up my feelings on my life of these years briefly and well. Acting a facade, he says I'm deeply suspicious and rarely entertained by conventionally accepted turning points in a plot, of events that are meant to seem earth-shatteringly dramatic when in fact, to me, they are merely predictable. My strong intuition leaves life with few surprises. Stumbling through gold mines and minefields, after a decade of the unusual becoming more usual, my quiet life was disrupted by dickheads and sex deviates. I learned to trust no one and live in the moment. I've lived through many illegal privacy breach techniques. Technology and the disruptive, corrupt tactics taught me a lot about deception and perception. The depths of articulation, the skills of real-life acting. Living in the moment, real moments are consuming, overwhelming, deceiving, and dangerous. Subject to many persons with long histories of incarceration and heavy drug use, I did not really fit in, so to speak, in the prison environment, yet with an open mind listened to everyone, as best as possible, as an equal while I kept to myself. Adapting my own routine of TV favorites to daily life incarcerated, and clearly spending a lot of my time engrossed in literature and writing. Despite some gossip from the AWP schoolyard that I heard about myself, witnessed by the AWP employees' screws, was to begin with my excessive coffee consumption, regular time out of cell over lunch, when able, exercise, love of my pen and regular request for envelopes. Indulging in arts for some of this time and posting an outstanding amount of outgoing mail to productively pursue litigation for personal injury, defamation, and my release. Love of self. Loving yourself is an important aspect of surviving prison, which is weird to think about, surrounded by depressed, drug-dependent demographics. What love of self means to me, regard for one's own happiness, compassion for others and self, practice of self-care actions and activities, connection with your inner energy, meditation, etc., respecting your own uniqueness and allowing your personal authenticity to manifest. Living in the moment, just for at least a moment every day. Decide that you are enough and watch what happens. There are some great stories out of oppression and detainment. Many political leaders have faced litigation and incarceration. Politics is my desired future after. Fashion. A human rights activist, not a man nor a martyr. This incarceration nearly broke my poor little spirit and its hopes for resolution and fair trial regarding police and government criminal negligence. I had to remind myself that great things people have achieved much out of adversities. To watch free speech eroding at any avenue with oppression allowed to flourish in covert and obscure ways, while Julian Assange was finally free from incarceration himself, is surreal. Attention drawn to the plight of human rights gives others in jeopardy of the same ill treatment the opportunity to be saved, they say. Those who police opinion and our rights to freely speak the truth are guilty of vile and heinous atrocities. The why was I here? Question and answer pounded at the forefront of my mind. Why? Because no one wanted to be responsible for failing to address sexual violence against disabled persons, sexual violence by police, government ministers, against minors and decades of criminal negligence in governance in general. The legal reasons and legislative acts which say I should not have been incarcerated finish this chapter. Human rights matter. Whistleblower protection. This concerns protecting people who act in the public interest when disclosing serious wrongdoing to the authorities. This wrongdoing usually relates to environmental and health issues or information relating to corruption, misconduct, and maladministration in public. Administration. Laws protecting whistleblowers exist at both the state and Commonwealth levels. Specifically, my public disclosures and my immunity when it comes to doing so. Public interest information may be disclosed in certain circumstances to a journalist or a member of parliament, other than a minister of the Crown. Where a person has previously made an appropriate disclosure to a relevant authority and has not, within the specified time frame, received notification that their disclosure has been assessed. They may then disclose that information to a journalist or MP. The objects of the PID Act are to encourage and facilitate the disclosure, in the public interest, of information about substantial risks to public health or safety, or to the environment, and about corruption, misconduct, and maladministration in public administration. Roman 2. B. To ensure that there is appropriate oversight of public interest disclosures about corruption, misconduct, and maladministration in public administration. As a whistleblower, reporter of governance-associated crimes, I have been subject to institutional torts harassment acknowledged by Magistrate Teresa Anderson in 2018 at the Mount Gambier Magistrates Courts, and reprisal regarding reporting criminal negligence in the disability sector. I should be protected under whistleblower laws of state and federal litigation. The law states, 1. A person who causes detriment to another on the ground, or substantially on the ground, that the other person or a third person has made or intends to make an appropriate disclosure of public interest information, commits an act of victimization. 2. An act of victimization under this act may be dealt with, as a tort. Or B, as if it were an act of victimization under the Equal Opportunity Act 1984. But if the victim commences proceedings in a court seeking a remedy in tort, the victim cannot subsequently lodge a complaint under the Equal Opportunity Act 1984. And conversely, if the victim lodges a complaint under that act, the victim cannot subsequently commence proceedings in a court seeking a remedy in tort. 3. If a complaint alleging an act of victimization under this act has been lodged with the Commissioner for Equal Opportunity, and the Commissioner for Equal Opportunity is of the opinion that the subject matter of the complaint has already been adequately dealt with by a competent authority, the Commissioner for Equal Opportunity may decline to act on the complaint or to proceed further with action on the complaint. 4. In proceedings against a person seeking a remedy in tort for an act of victimization committed by an employee or agent of the person, it is a defense to prove that the person exercised all reasonable diligence to ensure that the employee or agent would not commit an act of victimization. 5. A person who personally commits an act of victimization under this act is guilty of an offense. Maximum penalty, $20 or imprisonment for 2 years. 6. Proceedings for an offense against subsection 5 may only be commenced by a police officer or a person approved by either the Commissioner of Police or the Director of Public Prosecutions. 7. In this section, detriment includes a loss or damage, including damage to reputation, or B, injury or harm, including psychological harm, or C, intimidation or harassment, or D, discrimination, disadvantage, or adverse treatment in relation to a person's employment, or E, threats of reprisal. F, for the purposes of this section, a threat of reprisal may be A, express or implied, or B, conditional or unconditional, and in any proceedings dealing with an act of victimization, including proceedings for an offense against subsection 5. It is not necessary to prove that the person threatened actually feared that the threat would be carried out. Legislation ETRACT. 5. Immunity for appropriate disclosure of public interest information. 5. A disclosure of public interest information is made to a relevant authority if it is made to where the information relates to a public officer. A person who is, in accordance with any guidelines prepared under Section 14, designated as a person who is taken to be responsible for the management or supervision of the public officer, or to the relevant responsible officer. Or Roman 2, a person who is, in fact, responsible for the management or supervision of the public officer, or to the relevant responsible officer. Or B, where the information relates to a public sector agency or public sector employee. Roman 2, C, the Commissioner for Public Sector Employment, or the responsible officer for the relevant public sector agency, or where the information relates to an agency to which the Ombudsman Act 1972 applies, the Ombudsman. Or E, where the information relates to a risk to the Environment Protection Authority. Or F, where the information relates to a risk to the Environment Protection Authority. or where the information relates to an irregular and unauthorized use of public money or substantial mismanagement of public resources, the Auditor General, or where the information relates to a risk to the environment, the Environment Protection Authority, or G, where the information relates to the commission or suspected commission of any offense, a member of the police force, or H, where the information relates to a judicial officer, the Judicial Conduct Commissioner, or J, where the information relates to a person or a matter of a prescribed class, an authority declared by the regulations to be a relevant authority in relation to such information, or K, a minister of the Crown, or L, OPI, or M, any other prescribed person or person of a prescribed class. The Corporations Act 2001, CTH, also protects officers and employees of a company who disclose information of illegal practices, fraud, or misappropriation of funds to company auditors. It is an offense under the Act for a person to be penalized, victimized for such disclosures. The Public Interest Disclosure Act 2013, CTH, protects public officials, wider than public servants, includes defense force and others, who make prescribed disclosures. The disclosure must be made to an authorized officer or to the person's supervisor. The person disclosing the information is protected from civil and criminal liability as well as disciplinary action. Public interest information affects the well-being of the community. The Act applies differently to the following two types of public interest information. 1. Environmental and health information, where there is a substantial risk to the environment or to public health and safety. 2. Public administration information, where there is potential corruption, misconduct, or maladministration in public administration. Protections are provided for public officers who make an appropriate disclosure of public administration information, and for all persons who make an appropriate disclosure of environmental and health information. Preventing or hindering disclosure, a person must not prevent another person from making an appropriate disclosure of public interest information under this Act, or B, hinder or obstruct another person in making such a disclosure. The PID Act is non-derogation. This Act is in addition to, and does not derogate from, any privilege, protection, or immunity existing apart from this Act under which information may be disclosed without civil or criminal liability. 5. Immunity for appropriate disclosure of public interest information. 1. If a person makes an appropriate disclosure of environmental and health information, or B, a public officer makes an appropriate disclosure of public administration information, the person is not subject to any liability as a result of that disclosure. 2. This section has effect despite any duty of secrecy or confidentiality or any other restriction on disclosure, whether or not imposed by an act applicable to the person. 3. A person makes an appropriate disclosure of environmental and health information for the purposes of this Act if the disclosure is made to a relevant authority, and the person believes on reasonable grounds that the information is true. Or B, is not in a position to form a belief on reasonable grounds about the truth of the information, but believes on reasonable grounds that the information may be true and is of sufficient significance to justify its disclosure, so that its truth may be investigated. 4. A public officer makes an appropriate disclosure of public administration information for the purposes of this Act if the disclosure is made to a relevant authority, and the public officer reasonably suspects that the information raises a potential issue of corruption, misconduct, or maladministration in public administration. 5. A disclosure of public interest information is made to a relevant authority if it is made to where the information relates to a public officer. A person who is, in accordance with any guidelines prepared under Section 14, designated as a person who is taken to be responsible for the management or supervision of the public officer or to the relevant responsible officer. Or Roman 2, a person who is, in fact, responsible for the management or supervision of the public officer or to the relevant responsible officer. Or B, where the information relates to a public sector agency or public sector employee. Roman 2. C, the Commissioner for Public Sector Employment, or the responsible officer for the relevant public sector agency. or where the information relates to an agency to which the Ombudsman Act 1972 applies, the Ombudsman. Or D, where the information relates to a location within the area of a particular council established under the Local Government Act 1999, a member, officer, or employee of that council. Or E, where the information relates to a risk to the Environment Protection Authority. Or F, where the information relates to a risk to the environment, the Environment Protection Authority. Or where the information relates to an irregular and unauthorized use of public money or substantial mismanagement of public resources, the Auditor General. Or G, where the information relates to the commission or suspected commission of any offense, a member of the police force. Or H, where the information relates to a judicial officer, the Judicial Conduct Commissioner. Or I, J, where the information relates to a member of Parliament, the presiding officer of the House of Parliament to which the member belongs. Or where the information relates to a person or a matter of a prescribed class, an authority declared by the regulations to be a relevant authority in relation to such information. Or K, a minister of the Crown. Or L, OPI. Or M, any other prescribed person or person of a prescribed class. Ex gratia payment and entitlement which the South Australia, SA, not limited to government, should choose to provide to myself, severely affected by a wrongful conviction. What is an ex gratia payment? An ex gratia payment is a one-off payment which a state or territory government may choose to provide to someone affected by a wrongful conviction, on its own accord or due to a request by a party. States and territories are able to make these discretionary payments, with their authority flowing from the executive power provided to the government under the Constitution. Payments are made at the discretion of the territory or state attorney general, and a decision to refuse to make a payment is not reviewable in any way, with no guidelines imposed. The provision of compensation for miscarriage of justice in the circumstances may be by administrative procedures rather than pursuant to specific legal provision. What are other schemes of compensation? In New Zealand, a formal scale has been developed for ex gratia payments, including NZ 150000 for each year in custody, in addition to up to NZ 100000 for loss of livelihood during that period, and up to NZ 50000 to help readjust to living in the community. Without such a scale, it is hard to determine what compensation may be provided, with determination thus branded as arbitrary and inconsistent. While any payment is better than none, when seeking compensation, a wrongfully convicted person shouldn't be left to the discretion of an administrative decision-maker whose determination about whether to provide compensation, and how much if so, cannot be appealed and is not determined by reference to any objective scale. Commented Pettit. The United Nations developed the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Under Article 14 of the ICCPR, everyone has the right to liberty and freedom from arbitrary detention. Where this right has been violated, victims should be compensated according to the laws of their country. In 1980, the Fraser government agreed to ratify the ICCPR, validating it as international law. The United Nations' own Human Rights Commission has consistently stated that these options are unsatisfactory, recommending on multiple occasions that Australia withdraw the reservation. In some cases, even when exonerees are awarded, they make sure to say that this does not set a precedent. Dioso Villa, senior lecturer in the School of Criminology and Criminal Justice at Griffith University and a member of the Griffith Criminology Institute. Recourse can include ex gratia payments made despite there being no legal obligation to do so, which are offered in a range of situations involving income loss or damage costs. In Australia, ex gratia payments for wrongful conviction are made at the sole discretion of a state's attorney general, a government-appointed position. Payments are often politically motivated, only granted after extensive public outrage or a royal commission, like in the case of Lindy Chamberlain. Decisions regarding compensation awards are rarely published, and there is little transparency in the decision-making process or in the way that compensation is calculated. We don't know what happens behind the scenes, how they reach their decisions before the awards are given or denied, explained Rachel Dioso Villa, a senior lecturer at Griffith University in Queensland, who published the most extensive list of Australia's wrongful convictions. Human Rights Opinion article, When Justice Fails, Wrongful Convictions in Australia by Phoebe Meaton, 2020. Closing this introduction, a repeat of a quote published in previous books which briefly and distinctly describes some of the emotions which overwhelmed me during wrongful conviction. It is difficult to imagine, for a person who is otherwise generally a law-abiding citizen, a more humiliating experience or a greater shock to one's equilibrium than being forcefully deprived of one's liberty for even a relatively short period of time in circumstances which are entirely unjustified. This is all the more so where that curtailment of liberty is accompanied, as in the present case, by the detained person being handcuffed and marched through a crowd of onlookers, and then incarcerated in a police paddy wagon, locked in a cell at the police station, and fingerprinted and photographed as a criminal. Not surprisingly, the whole experience must have been both humiliating and highly embarrassing. Compensation for wrongful conviction is not only a right, a human right, but it is a necessity to deter, stop and repent an action which sometimes has no compensable measure for the suffering inflicted by this demoralizing, dehumanizing, destabilizing, and humiliatingly damaging ordeal. Lara Zarowski, a law instructor at the University of Washington, worked with her students to advocate for legislation aimed at compensating the wrongfully convicted, successfully introducing a statewide law in 2013. Zarowski said, "It is a vehicle, really, for people in this position to be able to get some sort of nominal amount for their immeasurable pain and suffering. It also represents official recognition that these cases can and do happen. Courage, strength, determination, and human dignity can survive even the most extreme and brutal conditions." Malika Oufgir, author Michelle Fidowsi. A quote from a book about General Mohammed Oufgir, eldest daughter. I read the book while incarcerated at AWP. Another quote follows. As a result of having come so close to death, she has a detachment from life. A statement to which I personally closely relate. Feeling very detached from life at times. Surviving moments that tempt death in numbers. The incarceration tort at the AWP was going to make or break me. June 3, July 15, 2024, 42 days at the Adelaide Women's Prison, Tort 1, Incarceration, by SAPOL. Midnight 1 June 2024 until 3 June 2024 at Elizabeth Cells. The Adelaide Women's Prison, AWP, a clear arm of government and Freemasonry, to me from admit into the institution. No presumptions of innocence in this hellhole of peers and criminals. Guards bring in drugs and receiving head jobs, more drugs in the low-security unit than can be dealt with, repeating loosely how a manager put it. Guards played sports with police, commuted with prosecution and courts, nosy people prying into the lives of the unsentenced doing more bad than good as I witnessed it. Yet, no avenue for the innocent. I was innocent. I did not send the corny email read to the courts on the 15th of July 2024. The email was my email, yes, but the first email especially was definitely not me. I knew I was set up, so to speak, to be oppressed, literally 16 days before Barbwire Noose registered clothing. My One Love television commercial, TVC, launched on Channel 9. My second trimester of 3 set to start. I was supposed to finish my fashion and sustainability diploma in 2024, not 2025. This study disrupted by torts based around sex crimes. I was starting over to get so far before some government-funded agenda kicked me and my brand in the guts, over and over again. I was not informed of the charges I faced for nearly 2 hours. I was not cautioned as a disturbance at the property. When the paperwork arrived, the names Konstantinos David Kyriakou, SAPOL ID 40657, and Kurt Gavin Slavin, DOB 7NOV1958. A sex offender, Kurt Slavin, and his cover-up accomplice, Kyriakou DOB 1JUL1975, the culprits of an incarceration tort. Both police officers' persons I had reported for misconduct, reports made during the AFP-overseen homicide investigation to which I am labeled as a Crown witness. Both these police officers crying victims were both involved in the sex industry and knew of the child abuse, which was rife in the industry. Both these police officers have turned a blind eye to young teenagers used as prostitutes. Both these police officers I had personally reported to ICAC-SA at least half a dozen times for criminal and serious misconduct. The reasons that saw me in courts, victimized numerous times, over no case to answer matters were vindictive, intentional, malicious, institutional, and boys' club-driven. For basically 2 days and 2 nights, I lay frozen, deprived of socks, no heating, no pillow, no nutritious food, no phone access, no legal access. I had to ask for toilet paper and toilet on camera. This is the standard of basic needs provided at the Elizabeth Police Station in the Cells area to both the innocent and the guilty. Degrading, humiliating, disrespectful, and wrong. Personally, recovering from the flu, I thought I was going to catch pneumonia. Ripped out of bed around midnight, based on perjury engaged by a creepy old man, a jealous ex-wife of the creepy old man, his money-hungry daughter's family, a pedophile protection racket, and a statement falsified by the sex offender I reported in 2014, ongoing at this time. Kurt Gavin Slavin, DOB 7NOV1958. Mount Gambier Corrections appealing for bail on my behalf. The Regional Corrections Facility vouching in court, stating on the 5th of June 2024, 5 days into myself being remanded in custody of police, that I had no convicted criminal history and incarceration was not appropriate regarding myself and my health, CPTSD triggered by police, namely Kurt Gavin Slavin, DOB 7NOV1958. Police refused bail. 4 days remand and excessive penalty for the accused crime of social media posting and emails to police stemming from legal matters. Numerous lawyers stating I should not have been incarcerated. Countless bail applications refused by the police and judges over the 2 prison stints. Police prosecution from both Adelaide Prosecution and Port Adelaide Police Station, working hard to justify victimizing a complainant regarding government departments, etc. Kept over 40 days on remand in AWP, the first of 2 SA-located incarcerations due to police torts. A plea of convenience freeing me from this first sinister plot leading to incarceration. Approximately a month of an incarceration tort, the longest I had suffered in this type of an environment at this time. While incarcerated, I watched National Press Club on the 3rd of July 2024 talking the topic, free plus equal, safeguarding the rights of all Australians. Quoting guest speaker Professor Rosalind Croucher, President of the Australian Human Rights Commission, calling out leadership to federally legislate human rights in Australia. As we leave the COVID-19 pandemic in the rearview mirror, as we contemplate the challenges of climate change into the future, and as we consider the social justice implications of cost of living pressures, it is time for better protection of human rights to be a central consideration by our Parliament and our government. If we do value fairness, if we do value dignity, if we do care about equality of opportunity in this country, then we need this foundation of human rights to be embedded and strengthened for all. The centerpiece of our National Human Rights Reform Agenda is a National Human Rights Act. Oppressed by confinement, dehumanized, ignored, deprived, cold, mistreated, emotionally distressed, and subject to the most abhorrent conditions at times. Police forces were undeniably on a mission to cover up sex crimes. Personally, I was not surprised after witnessing multiple police forces across the country calling sex crimes, charged under the Crimes Act for the general public unethical conduct in order to bypass criminal charges and records. If that's not the unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people, discrimination. It certainly is a legal loophole for illegal, criminal conduct, which is a sickening reality and standard in Australian society. Discrimination has no bounds at times. Black-white, male-female, rich-poor, sporting personality prostitute. The prison system displaying obvious bias. The staff of AWP quick to judge me by the fact that I had an OnlyFans page. The mainly fat and somewhat judgmental bitter employees seemingly threatened by the confidence. OnlyFans is not illegal, rape is. The charges I faced had nothing to do with OnlyFans, sex work, or the nosy guards of AWP, and should have been dropped before they reached the extent where a substantial defamation case against Maxwell Wilson, DOB 2661939, grew substantially due to the perjury initiated to achieve the incarceration. After release from this tort instigated by low-life opportunists wanting to steal justice from our disabled peers and myself, I discovered that the Wilson family, Truro/Renmark, SA, had also on record with RAA roadside assistance, stated that my car was their vehicle, the key was inaccessible, lost, or something, and used RAA to break into my Barbwire Noose registered business vehicle, a financed vehicle owned by myself, sole trader, and technically my financial lender. Certainly not the Wilson family I had known for less than a month. Damaging much of my property, stealing my earrings worth over $600, some damages beyond repair, for example, my Samsonite laptop bag, bought for my up-and-coming international travels, had the lock part of the zipper destroyed to open the laptop case, which was locked prior to being damaged. Clearly, someone wanted to gain access to my personal details, including birth certificates, copies of identification, and legal matters, etc. A full privacy breach after breaking into my car. These people clearly broke into my locked belongings. This family, with no shame in the levels of hateful behavior they engaged for no good reason, went on to sell the property I was renting a room at, which was listed at an extremely escalated evaluation price. Then refused to pay myself for the hospitality work, waitressing alcohol service, I was employed for. Furthermore, ignoring the Fair Work Ombudsman's attempts to resolve the wages matter before court proceedings. Shameless, immoral, unethical, and criminal behavior. The illegalities I endured substantial. Strings of human rights violations, constitutional rights violations, and legislative offenses against myself. The defamatory claims of disturbing the peace, stalking, etc. seen Barbwire Noose registered clothing TVC airing with Channel 9 delayed by 2 months in 2024. My fashion and sustainability diploma lost for 2024. Investment. Prospects hindered and legal resolution including compensation delayed. Large Barbwire Noose registered projects funded by capital investments, publication prospects, and wages at this time. While I studied fashion and sustainability diploma via Collarts College located in Melbourne, Victoria, my studies online. I certainly was not financing my life with OnlyFans, which site income can prove. Studies heavily disrupted by SAPOL torts and SAPOL Police Commissioner Grant Stevens, DOB 1963. Men and women responsible for reducing criminal conduct in society determined to overlook pedophilia. The TVC, a year in the making with Channel 9 television network. By July 2024, I was in discussions to air Barbwire Noose registered clothing, Human Rights Matter, TVC via 10 network, Channel 10, also. This is how the first SAPOL incarceration tort ended. With me finding my car with a flat battery from the car alarm and my stuff piled without care into the vehicle minus some choice items and no legal grounds for such conduct. Plus, an expiation notice for marijuana possession, which could have been planted in my car by anyone. A simple cannabis offense applies to offenses of possessing up to 100 grams of cannabis, or 20 grams of cannabis resin, or smoking cannabis in private, or possessing equipment, for example, pipes, bongs, or cultivating not more than one cannabis plant. Controlled Substances Act 1984, SA, S45A. Furthermore, South Australian cannabis law states, if an expiation notice is not paid, an expiation reminder notice is issued, and a reminder fee is added to the amount owing. Enforcement proceedings will be taken by the Fines Enforcement and Recovery Unit to recover the amount and enforcement costs. The Fines Enforcement and Recovery Unit of South Australia, since harassment torts commenced by SAPOL in 2012, holding a substantial amount of evidence regarding the institutional harassment I have endured for over a decade. The matter would not normally go to court unless the offense is disputed. I dispute this offense profusely. I was not present, nor in possession of said substance. I was incarcerated in confinement of AWP at the time this expiation notice was issued. Defamation compensation regarding the criminal conduct damages of the Wilson family was aired publicly as soon as I could disclose the truth. My public disclosure of this activity, my attempt to minimize damages from defamation, as well as the Wilsons' family perjury on record with SAPOL, which led to damaging incarceration torts. After a long 2 nights of demeaning treatment by police at Elizabeth police station, living on pastries and in Eskimo try-out conditions, I heard cussing and screaming for 5 days when admitted to AWP. Isolated in my cell, I cheered every one of my sisters on after witnessing medical neglect and the degrading attitude of some of the employees, controlled by some great guards and some downright pigs. The D-Wing was a calm and confronting experience to have had at AWP, I know, after visiting numerous units of AWP. A chance to rehabilitate, pay your dues to society, move on to be a better person. Jail is not really like that. Full of more drugs than I've encountered on the streets. Not that I've lived or combed streets for drugs. Inmates trading medication for chocolate and psychological drugs for a different high was this world. Humans covet what they see, a famous line from the serial killer Hannibal Lecter of movie The Silence of the Lambs. That humans do, so when a supervisor laughs at suffering or encourages inmates to make other inmates have to suffer, etc., the idea of rehabilitation suffers. The end goal of incarceration shifts. A lot of AWP operations based on uniforms, cop wannabes, ex-cops, employment-based friendships. I certainly could not trust anyone around me, police, security guards, SA labor government. Fed by Chinese whispers, we all know how that ends from just a class of 30 people in primary school. A cellie I had in the Rose Units of Living Skills unit in the prison put it best. There is no honesty amongst thieves. Very true of the environment at AWP, some inmates with loyalty, few and far between. I learnt quickly to want and trust not. I asked for a single cell upon this first admit, which is why I was placed in what is called D-Wing, a 24-hour monitored cell block which housed under a dozen inmates, allowing no visitations and no purchase privileges. Watching, looking for Modi on the ABC is when I began taking notes regarding media I viewed and reading I indulged. Significantly, I watched world leaders and surviving veterans of the Normandy landings gather on both sides of the channel. The 80th anniversary of D-Day. USA President Joe Biden, Emmanuel Macron and Princess Anne in France taking part in commemorations, with King Charles, Rishi Sunak and Prince William in the UK paying tribute to those who fought to replace tyranny with freedom during the service at the key departure point of Portsmouth. Tyranny, the struggle I faced. The AWP breached my privacy within 4 days of being admitted under remand. SAPOL starting the chain of stupidity by stating where I had been transported to in conversation with someone who'd been in my life less than a week. I had known Reese for barely 4 days. A person who had checked out my OnlyFans via his work colleague's subscription before pursuing a relationship with me. A very sudden, overwhelming pursuit of a relationship. He was a nice guy, around my age, but I was not physically attracted to him at all, too skinny, almost gaunt-looking when we met. I knew basically nothing about Reese, a brand new apparent friend in life. The police and AWP employees should never have shared details about myself with a person who was practically a stranger. Forced by the situation to get to know Reese, it turned out that he was actually an all-right guy. Fireworks, yes. After he gained nearly 20 kilograms while I suffered these torts. Marriage, no. God knows I had been very celibate during my time at AWP. No, gay for the stay activity with me. More so than over the decade where I dated basically no one and got engaged, 2021, to Travis Paul Enman Jr., DOB 16 JAN 1989, Texas, USA. Reese in June 2024 basically. A stranger. Who I later learnt was oddly obsessing over myself, kind of like Travis on Instagram. Travis, my sexy American. Reese turned out to be the perfect dose of what I needed at this time, until he was. A compulsive liar, as his ex-girlfriend and mother of his 4th child he rarely sees calls him. I agree with her. He is a liar. That stated, for the most part I enjoy the moment and time spent together. We both made each other feel good, and that's the point of relationships, friendships as a core element, I suppose. The classic song, What's Love Got to Do With It, by icon Tina Turner, the theme song of this moment. Myself still deeply in love with Travis and still not over my ex-boyfriend Eric, yet somewhat over it all, life, men, trying, arguing. I was exhausted over everything. I can go with the flow and did in the first few months after release. It was the breach to my privacy that forced me to get to know my new friend, practically a stranger, Reese, for my own peace of mind. The need for an intervention order regarding Reese had subsided by December. My concerns were faint, yet in July was very relevant. Taking actions legally regarding the misconduct I witnessed at AWP, I had the added concern regarding a stranger posing as a friend. I needed to know who or what I was dealing with since Reese was following me around and hanging around while I was housed in jail. Real shit, real at-time thoughts, and an issue when I was to be released from this disaster plot. Hectic life events and all traumatic, I wanted to know what this seemingly possible psycho wanted. Clearly it was just to get laid. Rye's uncle, a police officer of VICPOL, the plot surrounding his pursuit thickened in my mind. Money, sex, status to try and tarnish my reputation, a plot to fuck me over all thoughts in my head. I felt like Prince Harry, DOB 15 Sept 1984, questioning everyone. Paranoia regarding friends, he accurately described in his court win against Rupert Murdoch's flagship United Kingdom. UK, tabloid the emotions attached to widespread and habitual phone hacking, distrusting everyone around. The stress, feelings of suicide, nausea, headaches, and overall detriment to my health overwhelming. Deprived of fair trial and representation, I heavily related to my disabled peers at this time. Oppressed and dependent on others to fight for me. As our disabled peers, I reported criminal negligence and sexual violence on behalf of, in 2004, ongoing were dependent on me. Advocating human rights, I felt lucky I had a voice just. Unlike those mute, non-cognitive disabled persons myself and brand, Barbwire Noose registered, represent. Human rights, basic rights solidified in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights after World War II, WWAI, still fragile and fragmented in application, almost a century after development showing the inhumane progress of government and power over these times. My family's contribution to the oppression and emotional psychological abuses endless. My parents determined to continue the downward trajectory of their lives, receiving kickbacks from the gypsy jokers and favor from governing institutions, police, TAFE SA, migrant housing, all discussed, for silence and compliance. Weak individuals do weak things. Scared by assaults, threats, and exposure to organized crime associated with police and government agendas. I personally wondered why anyone would want to contribute to such vulgar acts, agendas of history. Money over morality. I struggled to sleep. Eating was an effort, but easier through stress and anxious times. The truth in black and white circulated the world, while the blind grabbed a highlighter and tried to cover up what was in plain sight with frivolous grabs at mental health concerns, disregarding suicide, which was the only real concern. A controlling environment, incarceration. Medics were active and plainly empathetic towards me during the demeaning, humiliating, damaging, and destabilizing experience I endured while writing notes in judgment. I judged them. They judged me, as they encouraged my feelings to be shared. In prison, I witnessed many fear-invoking activities and deliberate antagonization from staff and others around me. The lack of duty of care regarding confidential and privileged knowledge out of control. For my whereabouts to be shared via administration, and the visits branch of the prison just booking in my new friend, literally, to Zoom visit me. The reckless endangerment was evident often. Reese did not have to specify my birthday to book a visitation, only full name. He told me upon release. Recorded phone lines at AWP, the proof is in the pudding. A visitation I canceled, an act of stalking in my eyes, honestly. My full name and date of birth as a public figure available to anyone and everyone. Early in to admit at AWP was madness in chaos. The activities and events I witnessed at AWP only escalating over the period I was incarcerated. From case management coordinators, CMC, running neglectful, vindictive, and lawless investigations into false allegations which had been cleared and aired in public disclosures for years. Disruptions to my legal representation and outgoing mail while suffering through a tort of incarceration. The process of injustice, abuse of power, and oppression was blatantly obvious and shameless. I was moved through 4 units of the AWP over a month before productive, meaningful legal representation was engaged. Feeling the full effects of emotional distress in efforts to inflict psychological suffering and suicide. Deliberate acts to engage anguish and man-made suffering on a whistleblower to continue a cover-up decades upon decades of sex crimes under mainly SA labor governance assisted by Freemasonry, Christian-based institutions, and police forces. The Boys Club. The wrath of institutional-based abuses abhorrent and relentless despite extensive exposure of these crimes to lawyers, media, and federal representatives, including the Australian Federal Police, AFP. My 5th week in incarceration. On the 10th of July 2024, I was deprived of 2 free stamps inmates are entitled to per week in efforts by AWP staff to stop the media. My letter to Ally Langdon of A Current Affair. Channel 9. My legal defamation claims plus letters to publishers, and even my parents were being prevented from posting. This was the first of numerous letters going unposted, and read whether specifying legal content or not. I purchased stamps at $1.50 per stamp, a total of up to $15 worth of stamps could be purchased per week for postage. Nelson Mandela, Conversations with Myself, Chapter 8, Heiress, reads, 27. From a letter smuggled from prison to lawyers in Durban, dated January 1977, disappearance of letters in transit. The number of letters that disappear in transit is far too large to be explained on the basis of the inefficiency of the PO, Post Office, DPT, and from the unreasonable and persistent refusal of the CO to allow us to register our letters, I must draw the inference that their disappearance is not accidental. Myself making personal efforts, mail a basic level of communication with the real world. I continue to try and stop this insidious, diabolical agenda of a cover-up, despite the confinement of detainment. How sad is it that in almost half a century people's loathes to obstruct justice can be compared to the actions of today? Oppression has no age or bounds. Man craves power above all. The conditioning of the job and these surroundings showing AWP employees' minds wander with suspicion and idle gossip, which they should not. Police and corrections officers are certainly not judge nor jury. Born in Adelaide, the city of churches hiding seedy incest and pedophilia offenses broadly known. The Corrections Department's role in oppressing the seedy truth also broadly known. Homosexuality a broad basis of these crimes. What was not so broadly known was the Freemasons mixed up in the decades of sex offenses and government employment allowing these crimes to fester. The Adelaide Grand Lodge, SANT, hiding and harboring police and government sex offenders for years, benefiting from power in associations, blackmail, extortion bribes, and lodges run like brothels. If the sex trade was not within the lodge, it was in the hotels, motels next to the lodges. A moral and ethical religion over centuries becoming a cult, boys' club of immoral sloths, driven more by power and greed, over morality, integrity, and humanity. Witnessed firsthand by myself as a co-Freemasonry Mason. The only way to clean up the once grandiose religion was to expose the flaws, false Freemasons, the greed for power at any cost. My incarceration based on a Freemason's perjury followed blindly by fellow members doing exactly that. Freemasons involved with the police force and the AWP easily manipulated, not seeking the truth like a true Freemason, exposed the bad amongst the good. The blind leading the blind, widening the eyes of those who wanted integrity. Decades of police justifying their crimes, a direct contribution to the rise of sex crimes, which plagued Australia at this time and infiltrated the Freemasons. A toxic lack of accountability. Police policing the police, the problem I faced, a broadly known and publicized issue, especially when Indigenous deaths by police in custody of police forces or corrections staff are of media attention. The truth, an elephant in the room. The problem, police policing police, that seen greed flourish and bringing the rise of methamphetamine ice issues of this decade. A war drug out of WWII morphed during the Afghanistan war, something that allows people to develop a mindset lacking care, compassion, kindness, accountability, humanity. Destroying the humane compass of life one addict at a time. Facts undeniable yet denied. Why? Because those in power benefit from the complacency of man. Greed feeds greed. Like porn can lead to sin, and sinners love an excuse. Bribery to the notions of common man overpowers over every times. In the era of information and ignorance, a century in the making, the internet, a tool of greatness and destruction, still sees people governed by old ways in new days. Surrounded by ignorance, as education grows abundant, yet abundance is not enough to overcome man's love for bliss in ignorance. I felt sorry for the inmates who seen the AWP, prison, as their home. Demographical issues and abuses lending power to power, inhumane power, and feeding the attention, hunger, food, regime needs to fit in somewhere that some of these people desperately craved. Personally single for the most part of my 30s and predominantly celibate over this period. One forced relationship in 2017 2018 I choose not to acknowledge, and much time spent alone in my own peace and solitude had taught me much about attention and desire. Self-worth and self-approval more important than attention, dependent emotional connection, and even the human touch. Prison seen me miss pets, animals, and plants, nature, more than the first false incarceration I suffered in 2022 at Dame Philly's Frost Center, Victoria, AUS. Not missing people, a byproduct of detainment. On the 11th of July 2024, after a week of legal progress towards my release and resolution, I finally found some peace pulling me out of the thoughts of suicide and slums of CPTSD. Many thanks to the genuine interactions and people I met in this dark time. Small gestures, kindness, and consideration really mattered. Kindness always matters. Kindness is truly revolutionary. On this day, a Thursday, I actually looked forward instead of wondering if and how I would recover from this experience. I planned a future, not just a passing. Seeing opportunity, not the end. As the court dates approached, the 16th of July 2024, having already pled not guilty on the 7th of June 2024, being innocent of charges based on perjury and lacking evidence, circumstantial, ultimately a no case to answer case. A victim impact statement undisclosed and seemingly non-existent at this time. Police claiming I was wanted and homeless, both statements untrue, damaging, defamatory. Sapple had me behind bars over a year-old charge, claiming I was wanted despite myself having numerous interactions with SAPOL, including the Police Commissioner Grant Stevens, DOB 1963, in approximately September 2023, where he assigned a SAPOL detective to the outstanding sex crime Kurt Gavin Slavin, DOB 7 NOV 1958, committed against myself in 2001. Since communicating with SAPOL Police Commissioner Grant Stevens, DOB 1963, 2023, my life again had been met with damaging allegations and defamation with no basis or facts. On the paperwork presented to courts leading to this incarceration tort was SAPOL Police Commissioner Grant Stevens, DOB 1963, name as informant. A court-issued, official certificate of record showing this fact is text included in this publication. I have no doubt that the wanted flag in SAPOL's digital system, which seemingly did not exist in April 2024. Considering I had attended SAPOL headquarters Adelaide and spoke to numerous police and state police forces, it can be concluded the authorization to arrest me was issued by persons high-ranking in SAPOL, e.g. Grant Stevens, DOB 1963. Police Commissioner SAPOL, Konstantinos David Kyriakou, Chief Inspector, SAPOL ID 40657, CD Corrupt Star Force personnel and governing officials. The sexual criminal conduct I reported against SAPOL officers at redress, compensation, stage by this year, 2024. Offenses of police sexual misconduct reported to SAPOL over 4 years, with SAPOL police taking 2 years 2017-2018 to finalize the statement against the accused ex-police officer. S. It was obvious to me the incarceration and charges I faced were institutional harassment. Konstantinos David Kyriakou, SAPOL ID 40657, obsessed with myself as his accomplice to efforts of entrapment express in 2021. The obsession evident in every false statement he presents to court. The date of the offense I faced in court, July 2024, was an alleged offense committed in April 2023. I was staying in a shared dorm temporarily as I prepared to travel home from the Northern Territory to South AUSD after a malicious termination of my lease. The YHA accommodation was shared with a police officer associated, SAPOL, NTPOL, AFP police forces, felon Brian Porker, born Darren Nixon, with numerous persons involved in malicious, vindictive, and illegal conduct having access to my phones and laptop at this time. Institutional harassment, irrefutable, and magistrate acknowledged with pending high court address. After 42 days in incarceration at AWP, 45 days in custody total based on perjury, I intended to plead guilty to the matter on the 16th of July 2024. A plea of convenience, the matter brought forward to 15th of July 2024. The plea ensured I was released, time served at least. A over-year-old email in dispute sent by another person from my email addressed the basis of a charge stemming from an intervention order based on perjury. After excessive incarceration, represented in my best interests probability worst case was time served. Good gamble. Seeking a no record, charge dropped best outcome, the no record limiting damages to my employment and prospects. Damages already excessive and irrefutable, presented to court, including high courts, after 10 years of institutional harassment, a pursuit of malicious accusations with no basis, facts, or evidence driven by perjury, criminal conduct, and a cover-up, resolution was of the utmost importance to me. My release from an incarceration tort, a political prisoner lawlessly subject to man-made human suffering. A fashion designer missing the runway, designing from the inside. I was released on 15th July 2024, the conviction on record. Graciously, this time I was granted taxi transport to my car from AWP, which I needed RAA to start. Truro, South AUS from the RAA man was where I learned perjury was committed to break into my car. The time when the Wilson family, Truro/Renmark, SA, damaged my property and stole my belongings also. Quickly I sent information and documents to a defamation lawyer, Stanley & Co., Adelaide, SA. I had sought this litigation while incarcerated to deal with the highly distressing and damaging ongoings at 45 Murundi Street, Truro Pub, Truro SDH-AUS, which led to my imprisonment. This lawyer, Stanley & Co., despite the easy win and substantial fee they could recoup, Wilson's pub owner, the real estate in Truro Pub sold, 2024, for the Maid defamation case, stated they could not unfortunately represent myself as the civil claim progressed. No explanation has been given for this decision. Engaging in defamation litigation, criminal litigation, personal injuries litigation and redress. Despite my lack of interest in a personal injuries claim, firstly assisted by Liz Kefford, I did what I could whilst I was in jail. I dismissed services of Kefford/Ferguson due to claims made regarding my ex-boyfriend. The experience has been overwhelming. I seriously wanted to lose my shit or die. Full well knowing that, losing it threw away any hopes of justice for all, justice, an apology, for the disabled who more than deserve to be acknowledged as our peers with the same rights and dignity as all of us. My servitude is to not retaliate at the expense of the greater good. An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. Under the special care of SAPOL Mount Gambier, SA enduring the offense I reported, which occurred irrefutably in 2001. The institution is liable regarding the sex offense of 2001, bravely reported in 2014. 2024 to Police Ombudsman, SAPOL, ICAC-SA, and even submitted to the Royal Commission into Domestic, Family, and Sexual Violence, which commenced on the 1st of July 2024. Redress was an uncomfortable effort to engage. Surrounded by many victims doing the same type of claims, I found comfort and think the shared experience helped. The collective trauma environment of prison did help to make the act of seeking due compensation easier. Having not applied for redress since reporting this crime in 2014, justice had always been my focus. Achieving things while incarcerated helped stop the circulation of damaging and destructive thoughts flooding the forefront of my mind. Me, standing against men who would rather take a chance using the courts to convict an innocent victim, with an incarceration tort as opposed to taking responsibility. I put to the courts that I was a defendant, telling the truth, protesting genuine innocence, seeing obvious misinterpretations of facts in SAPOL's attempt to pervert the course of justice further after already being in contempt of court. 2020. After Magistrate Paul Foley ordered police to act on the statement I made against a criminal police department employee. A report made under the Crimes Act, which Konstantinos David Kyriakou, SAPOL ID 40657, engaged perjury submitting a false statement for his sex-offending colleague Kurt Gavin Slavin, DOB 7 NOV 1958. I attended court on the 15th of July 2024. The sex offender ex-SAPOL reported to SAPOL, Kurt Gavin Slavin, DOB 7 NOV 1958, had the intervention order based on perjury, part of the incarceration offending confirmed on the 16th of July 2024. The allegations twice have been withdrawn from trial. Using false allegations made to SAPOL, SAPOL's complacency with perjury protecting sex crimes for a decade, 2014, 2024. Facts publicly disclosed and in the hands of journalists, South Australian Attorney General. Australian Federal Police, AFP, Royal Commissions, countless Parliament ministers and media. Myself, not guilty of all allegations being made against me. The fact that no one stopped the implementation of this illegal intervention order giving me insight regarding the possibility of this cover-up to result in further incarceration torts. I was never properly formally served with these applications. Emails with me located interstate at times of court hearings. No threat to these men. Intervention completely unnecessary, and phone appearances acknowledge the orders, which I physically attended court to oppose once during this vexatious pursuit. No police force physically coming to me regarding the documentation. From memory, the perjury-based orders had been discussed once with a uniformed police officer prior to these torts. SAPOL and courts implementing orders I opposed, and I had provided significant details defending my position as a victim in the matters. I have never threatened, intimidated, harassed, or stalked the man who raped me as a child minor, while on duty as a police detective in 2001. The interim order to this matter, recorded as issued on the 2nd of June 2024, when I was in custody at the Elizabeth Police Station, accused of being in a mental state to which SAPOL stated I was not able to answer questions. Paperwork was discussed and shown to my emotionally distressed self during my time at these police station cells. This paperwork, I believe, was shoved into my property after I was traumatized by this arrest based on false allegations made by a pedophile I reported and his corrupt colleague. My lawyer Aaron Fornarino, DOB 1982, worked for the South Australian government and practicing law at Old Port Chambers, studying a Bachelor of Laws and Legal Practice at Flinders University. This is the lawyer that allowed the pedophile, Kurt Gavin Slavin, DOB 7 NOV 1958, to confirm the intervention order against myself, and then failed to apply for Supreme Court bail, as he promised at the time the second incarceration tort commenced. I dismissed him after unprofessional and unethical conduct, witnessing his interest to act for the boys' club benefits, and deliberately wasting my time. Aaron Fornarino, DOB 1982, worked briefly in my interests. Just justice was basically absent. My instructions on the 14th of July 2024 were simple: I am not guilty, yet after 40-odd days the time I had served exceeded a guilty plea. I wanted to be released and instructed Old Port Chambers to enter a plea of convenience for release, intending to appeal the outcome. The tort seen my fashion and sustainability diploma studies unable to be completed until 2025. The discussions surrounding me for over a month, and the allegations that led to my incarceration, these torts, clearly an attempt by police to oppress the human right of freedom of speech and create a false narrative, character assassination, perjury, obstructing justice, and the use of intervention orders to hide the extent of criminality in governance after years of publicly disclosing this out-of-control malfeasance and human rights violations. The trajectory of this cover-up due to these torts was set to implode. In 2019, the ambiguous facts flooded the Australian Associated Press, AAP. The truth by 2024, no longer ambiguous, detailed, accurate, irrefutable. Life evolves, things change, but that time stamp always remains, the things you've done and left undone. 10 Fast PACED Days, 10 Days of Freedom. Port Power vs. Richmond, Channel 9, Channel 10 Barbwire Noose registered, human rights, TVC, shopping, Botox, majestic minima. Being released from AWP was a whirlwind experience and short-lived. 10 days of productivity, peace, happiness, and rest before the torts started again. I had served more time than peers guilty of serious crimes, men guilty of severe domestic violence, repeat offenders. For 10 days, I was happy in my freedom, a fashion designer listed for Eco Fashion Week Australia, EFWA, 2024. The first incarceration tort took an extensive amount of time from my tailoring hours for EFWA. My consulate green card visa to the USA had been in the works for 3 years, further frustrating and delaying the expansion of my One Love clothing brand, Barbwire Noose registered. Over 10 years of disrupted progress, I plan to end my life either in AWP or outside if these torts continued. Literally, facts that were broadly known. Throughout the SA community, enough was enough. Jail time is not easy. I did well because I tried. They say a lie travels faster than the truth. This may be true, yet the truth will set you free. Imagine for a moment that you were disabled, unable to move to push someone away or feed yourself. Unable to speak to say no, that food is too hot, or that you are hungry. Yet you could feel, hungry, comprehend sound, shiver because you are cold. Close your eyes for a moment and really think about this reality. This is the reality of 4 out of 5 clients, our peers, whom I cared for as a disability officer employed by the SA Labour government. They lived at Charlie House, MT Gambier, during at least 2004-2005. Criminal negligence, I reported to the government, SA Labour government, 2004. This is the story behind the brand Barbwire Noose registered, and the motivation behind the ugly facts of these torts. The story behind the brand Barbwire Noose registered was released as a public disclosure of interest in 2019, officially published as an e-book in 2022, and the physical print copy book was published in 2023 by Austin Macaulay Publishers, first edition version. Human Rights Matter. Barbwire Noose registered represents their rights, disabled. Their voice, our rights, our voice. Peers for life, we the people. Despite my impressive judgment, intuition, and astonishing capacity for analysis, I managed to maintain through being disrespected, dehumanized, and abused by power. The revulsion I feel for all human rights violations is also a burden that gave me strength, determination, and courage. Fear is the root of all weakness. A weakness prison tries to groom, induce, and thrive upon. A weakness I am absent from. Deprivation and isolation fed a drive to speak out against the arbitrary, callous persecution I endured. Oppression of government criminal negligence, a cover-up of sex crimes by those in power, aided by weak men and women. I hoped for a better world. Hope and faith can move mountains. Staying at the Intercontinental during these 10 days, I went to the football Port Adelaide vs. Richmond with Reese, got Botox in my forehead wrinkles, engaged with both Channel 9 and Channel 10 regarding the broadcast of Barbwire Noose registered clothing, Human Rights Matter, TVC, and shopped for luggage bags and clothes for the USA. Conversing with my visa manager regarding taking the brand Barbwire Noose registered to the United States of America in person, and my ex-boyfriend Eric, who was in Paris, France, working as a cameraman at the Olympics, 2024. I visited the library in Port Pirie, SDHAUS, and typed all day for a week, ate junk food, wore my own gorgeous clothes. Hanging out mainly with my new friend Reese, the possible psych, and relaxing in a hotel room, majestic minima, Melbourne Street, Nth Adelaide, SA, as my new rental lease. Finalized. A whirlwind 10 days in July 2024 of freedom before SAPOL again took advantage of the system. Commissioner Grant Stevens, DOB 1963, using the might and power, quoting Channel 10, of the police force to victimize a complainant, a whistleblower, a little girl, to ultimately run a cover-up. The charges I face stemming from false allegations by Kurt Gavin Slavin, DOB 7 NOV 1958, caused much embarrassment and serious thoughts of suicide. The charge, having no case to answer, was not pursued by SAPOL from the 7th of June through to the 15th of July, when I was released from remand at AWP. SAPOL used the intervention order paperwork twice to incarcerate me, yet never pursued charges in trial. SAPOL sex offender Kurt Gavin Slavin, DOB 7 NOV 1958, had used a falsified claim that I stalked him as a basis to apply for an intervention order against me, the victim of his pedophile offending. I was portrayed as an unstable, violent offender, never convicted of a physically violent offense against a person in my life. The facts of the charge sheet gave me a glimpse, a revelation into the malicious agenda which had been playing out for over a decade in a character assassination of myself. Judgment and perception have no value here. The facts that the AFP played into these allegations with SAPOL, as opposed to the factual revelations made during the homicide investigation, coincide with Star Force input in the cover-up that they performed to save face in floundering to acknowledge the criminal. Negligence surrounding the death of Gordon, T-Hom due to SAPOL human resources involvement, detailed in autobiography, Ugly HEROS, The Price of Unlawful Enforcement, Europe Books Publishing House. Obvious as day to anyone seeking the truth and giving clear exposure to the significant amount of police using the drug-sex trade of these times. As many sex workers opened up to me and said, since 2019 when Ugly HEROS, The Price of Unlawful Enforcement was broadly public, over half of the prostitutes' clients are cops. The fact that for over 10 years, police, including the AFP, can be irrefutably called out for pursuing association, which is not true regarding me. I was a marijuana customer of the Moreland family, not a prostitute. How the murder of Gordon T-Hom transformed into a cesspool of bullshit is on the police forces. Well, described in my Ugly HEROS autobiography, synopsis concludes this publication. As for the police getting away with all this and twisting the focus on me, a pursuit of petty, frivolous anything offending, and not the sex crimes I reported, and that stemmed from my reports and complaints, that is a question for those in power to explain. As for the absence of the presumption of innocence in regard to extensive malicious and baseless allegations from uncreditable persons made against me, that's a questioning which bears burden and blame on all walks of life involved in this diabolical game of character, assassinating a little girl, me, the integral political prisoner, entrepreneur, whistleblower. Any onlooker would say I made the most of the 10 days I seen in between torts via AWP. Hectic is my life, rarely ordinary and somewhat hopefully boring at times. The football was fantastic because my team won. Wasn't worth suffering the whole 2 hours outside in Adelaide's winter, though. The stay at the Intercontinental was delightful, as thus far always. Caroline Newman, who squeezed me in for Botox and filler assessment, you are gorgeous and wound back the clock. I gained a new lease with my new friend Reese, and really enjoyed hanging out with him a little more and getting to know him. Finalizing authoring my ABO Book 6 of the series at the Port Pirie Library, as I spent my first of these 10 days at Reese, Caravan, chilling, writing, and chilling some more until we landed a house lease, and I traveled back into Adelaide to do city things. A few days' stay at the majestic Minima Hotel, who do not like medicinal marijuana or fully respect privacy, but did a wonderful job of babysitting my car from the 25th of July until the 5th of December 2024. I feel I make the most of most hours of my days, so I am not surprised in my productivity over these 10 days released following the first SAPOL incarceration torts. I was also not surprised by SAPOL's second incarceration tort considering my lawyer allowed the intervention order application by Kurt Gavin Slavin. DOB 7 NOV 1958 to be confirmed after my release, despite discussions regarding this application. The facts that SAPOL did not pursue alleged breach charges regarding Kurt Gavin Slavin, DOB 7 NOV 1958, twice in trial says it all really. Victimization at its finest. So not surprised that I was prepared with cash in hand and finances, bills payable, taken care of, for approximately 6 months to a year by advanced payment. I was picked up for the second incarceration tort with a little under $200 cash that I had withdrawn just in case. SAPOL stalked me while I was in the city. Good move. Arrested at the hotel room, escorted without cuffs to the police vehicle after 6 odd police attended the scene. Humiliating and a shock to be such a priority that I was not even allowed 2 weeks of freedom when being incarcerated based on lies. Lucky, I prepay my business vehicle loan and have no real outstanding expenses. The experience unglamorous, illegal, and degrading. I had the personality of a landmine regarding these torts at this stage. SAPOL should not have pushed the envelope and incarcerated me again. From pageantry to prison. Everything I have been on the line. A peek into the glamorous memory. 2015 until 2021, competing in pageantry like anything had its demons in the industry. Yet I did have fun. And love my other country, India. Interview for Indian Lifestyle magazine. Amazon, MagCloud. Year, 2021. Princess Marcia, India, Australia, discusses her NYFW debut with Lifestyle magazine. Model and designer Marcia Anita Hobbs carries a princess title from her Indian heritage. Born in Australia on the significant day of Anzac Day, 25th of April, 1984. Princess Marcia, brought up in regional South Australia, is no ordinary princess. Known as the rock princess of the pageant world, competing in largely known pageant systems, Earth, World, and debuting with United Nations pageants. Princess Marcia debuts one of the largest runways in the world this year, as one of Flying Solo's ones to watch. Flying Solo, as said by Vogue to be disrupting the fashion industry, launches the talented and unique human rights activism of Princess Marcia in September 2021. An actor, author, serial volunteer, and jack of all trades, talented designer model, broadly known for her infamous whistleblowing in Australia, is the founder of brand Barbwire Noose Registered. The unreplicatable brand trademarked in Australia by Princess Marcia in 2005. The brand carries a slogan, also trademarked, "Fear is the root of weakness." With edgy and unassigned designs for all ages, genders, and class types, BN Couture launches onto the NYFW runway with threads tailored in India and Australia. Unique to be on sale in Flying Solo stores after the event, Marcia's Your Call drama designs are uniquely drafted by her, detailing the construction of each BN Couture piece. A self-proclaimed diva, Princess Marcia is a Freemason. An academic with a master's in business administration, founder of Barbwire Noose Registered, Australian fashion label, available worldwide, except China. The family history, British, of Hobbs is extensive in military achievements. Marcia's father opened the Australian arm of Burger King. Fast food family restaurants, Hungry Jack's, across the state of South Australia. Marcia's mother also a successful manager and restaurant manager at Hungry Jack's. Marcia has held a national police clearance since the age of 16 and was accepted into Flinders University to study justice and society upon finishing year 12 in the year 2000. Signed talent with Australian Real People Agency, holding international and Australian pageantry titles. Marcia models, including promotional modeling, advocating for numerous like-minded organizations. Marcia, a volunteer as much as possible towards causes contributing to the objectives of the A Better World initiative of Barbwire Noose Registered. Marcia personally designed the logo and trademarked Barbwire Noose, registered with Intellectual Property Australia. Marcia, the lead designer and signatory designer for streetwear empowerment collection's Signature Puss. Products are personally handcrafted in the BN Couture Accessorize collection. A publicly active human rights activist with political aspirations and a dominant political presence. Marcia's hobbies are broad, loving music. Festivals, singing, dancing, literature, and outdoor sports. Marcia attended a Lendale East area school, a small rural school with primary and high school facilities. Teaching education department for the government from a teenager, an AUSDSWIM, nationally police-cleared employee, Marcia can teach all swim levels. Also employed in the government disabilities sector as a disabled care officer, IDSC was the first government department organization Marcia whistleblowed regarding criminal offending. Marcia has featured in television commercials, TVCs with agents in Australia. Part of the cast of South Australian. Government tourism advertisement for Mount Gambier, Marcia's hometown in 2019. Real People Victoria casting agents for Australian soap opera's Neighbours, Home and Away. Marcia has indulged the extras opportunities with SA Tourism, V8 Supercar, and also Hungry Jack's as a child star. The company Barbwire Noose registered and charitable arm, A Better World, has a mission and vision that solely revolves around A Better World initiatives, strongly supporting organizations with the same objective. Barbwire Noose registered, and Marcia can be associated with organizations such as Animals Australia, Amnesty International, World Wildlife Fund Australia, police initiatives, and human rights activism. Within the media, Marcia can be found in newspaper articles, magazines, including Triple J Magazine and World Class Beauty Queens Magazine, as well as numerous book publications. Marcia's designs featured on the Eco Fashion Week Australia 2017 2018 Sustainable Designers showcasing national and international designers, the first global eco-fashion event beginning in Canada, USA. Marcia's personal style takes form in the brand. Her collection for women called Signature Puss, an empowerment collection which inspires girls to be fearless and promotes strength, beauty, and wisdom within the wearer. Barbwire Noose registered involved in events such as Red Cross fundraiser featuring model Marcia in her French Affaire Couture designs, as well as Perth Eco Fashion Week Australia. Sponsorships in Melbourne and Adelaide extreme sports events, BMX championships, motorcycle racing, off-road racing, go-kart racing, and Fink Motorsport Northern Territory. The Princess brand was the official garment producer of the BMX South Australia Victoria Country Championship 2011 and the prestigious MS/Mrs. Earth Australia 2017. Marcia championed a stand for victims and human rights regarding sexual assault, equality, and dignity heavily during 2019 and 2021, with true accounts of neglect and sexual abuse shared in the governing National Commission hearings. Marcia's name is known to all in the national political address for her ruthless and relentless whistleblowing pursuits. Boldly and bluntly calling out human rights breaches, never holding back to verbalizing indecency, disrespect, and floundering accountability. Other social and public movements Marcia and brand Barbwire Noose registered have been involved in include signing to the World Kindness Movement, challenging Freemasonry of Australia to a higher level than its predecessors before her, and endless political grandstanding. Marcia continues to deliver passionate devotion to kindness and the fine line of not being weak in kindness, volunteering spare time and standing against bullying. Bullying a key concern amongst youth today, bystander culture, and organized crime. Inspiring and influencing our youth towards a better world, with sponsorship to the Police Street Smart Handbook, Neighborhood Watch incentives, Raise Foundation, and many more youth-oriented initiatives. Seen on billboards in New York Times Square and South Carolina promoting human rights and the brand's A Better World initiative, Princess Marcia lives her brand, a life of life music freedom. The Return to AWP Incarceration Tort 2 by SAPOL 2024. Throwing the justice system into disrepute with perjury, abuse of power and process with intent to pervert the course of justice. Do what is right, not what is easy. Kindness matters. Fear is the root of all weakness, locking me away, hopping no one will care, no one will notice. It felt like a relentless game of keep the cover-up rolling and make her seek the refuge of suicide. Desperate efforts to distort the truth, compromising my life and livelihood, as justice was torn from disabled persons and others incarcerated by petty harassment and setups. Australia needed human rights legislation at a federal level. I needed recognition under legislation regarding whistleblowing, and the desperation of petty oppressions and grabs at freedom of speech expression via intervention orders needed to stop the offender calling himself a victim, muddy water making it appear to be deep. Using Central Intelligence Agency, CIA terms, a practice of confuse and conflate to obstruct. Justice, right-thinking people's justice, Validating the basis of an intervention order each time a breach is put to court is a simple step towards avoiding injustice. Detained again. This time, overnight in the city Adelaide, SA. Arrested in the afternoon of the 25th of July 2024. SAPOL held me at the Adelaide Watch House with an active redress personal injuries claim against the offender, calling himself a victim. The purchase of my burial plot was as real as the plot to cover up sex crimes by targeting a whistleblower. The attitudes of the security police during this was derogatory and dismissive. Remand not rendering somebody guilty, I experienced little interactions that respected the legal presumption of innocence. Aussies treating peers as animals is un-Australian to me. I witnessed 3 welfare checks on a lady attempting to commit suicide while being held at the Adelaide Watch House. 3 welfare checks were engaged by staff before SAPOL finally discovered this woman's life was at risk due to the draw cords of her clothing, which is policy and procedure to remove. Traumatized by the corrupt ongoings surrounding me, I wondered how SAPOL would have covered up this woman's death with the media had she been left to her own devices for much longer. I have buzzed up concerned about the welfare checks, complaining about SAPOL staff and their interactions with this woman, luckily. My complaining was the only reason checks were performed to the point where they found this lady was not okay. Advocating a duty of care that should be legislated is a bittersweet reality. To be moved to AWP from police custody the second time, I appeared in Adelaide Magistrates Court in the afternoon. A dodgy judge directed a home detention check before bail was possibly approved. My lease began on the 5th of August 2024. I was set up to suffer at least another fortnight at AWP regarding this second tort, an inadequate outcome for a case regarding social media posts and my right to freedom of speech. Blind Freddy could see SAPOL and criminals, sex offenders, and those involved in covering up sex crimes were abusing intervention orders to target their victims and try to silence them. The idea of home detention, parading me as a criminal in public, inflicted by the pedophile that raped me at 16 years of age, a vile result to seek. I being set up and traumatized daily by the idea of a constant reminder of Kurt Gavin Slavin's DOB 7 and OV 1958 offense in the form of an ankle bracelet was not bylaid. I made sure the courts had on record immediately that I was not guilty and elected trial by jury for this matter. Trial by jury did not eventuate. In the legal discussions at the Adelaide Watch House, I agreed to my lawyer's suggestion of Supreme Court bail, which also did not eventuate. On the night of the 27th of June 2024, remanded at AWP, I had nightmares after being made aware of a sexual assault of a disabled inmate. On Monday, the 29th of July, at approximately 2 in the morning, 6 AWP screws attempted to move me in the middle of the night to share the cell with this creep of a woman. Directed to cell 7 on admission, Friday the 26th of July, 2024. Had shared my concerns about the ongoing creepy abuse in the Ruby unit with AWP staff. For these screws to then try and move me from cell 7 to cell 10, with the inmate I clearly had expressed I despised, was odd and intentional. I refused to cell up with this inmate. AWP screws started to tell myself that it would only be overnight, saying 4 hours, which was really 6 hours. Also stating I will be returned to my property and cell 7 the following morning. I did not care for the move, lies, false promises, and continued to refuse to move and sleep in cell 10 overnight. The move was unnecessary and inadequate where I was concerned, as well as inappropriate after I had raised a complaint about the inmate in cell 10. A traumatic floundering of AWP's duty of care and a compromise to my safety as I see it. It was on record that there had been sexual harassment and abuse engaged in on camera recordings, not just reported to AWP staff. The sexual harassment was expressed to me by other distressed inmates. The fondling occurred in the common area of AWP. A sexual abuse similar to the sex crimes I had reported working in Charlie House, Mount Gambier, SA. I was literally nauseated after being told of the incident, then furthermore by the attempt to cell me up with this person. Fellow inmates witnessed this prisoner assault the victim by walking up to her from behind and stating, "I like this boobie," while grabbing the mentally impaired inmate's boob without consent. Fellow inmates were mortified while on looking to see the victim sit with an uncomfortable expression on her face. During the morning, when I refused to change cells, while the move was being made, I reiterated the sexual harassment assault I had made AWP staff aware of previously. Over half a dozen AWP staff were aware of these sexual interactions. The response of AWP screws to begin with, during this move, after I expressed my reasons not to move cells, was shocking. The AWP screws proceeded to state that I had to sleep in cell 10 despite the sexual misconduct. One AWP screw is trying to gaslight me by saying the incident of sexual harassment did not happen. I continued to profusely refuse to sleep near, in the same cell with this.